Freezing, she snuck into the cowboy's home. "I can be useful, stay quiet. Just don't throw me out." Her hands were numb, her feet frozen in the worn shoes that had seen better days. She hugged herself tightly, trying to keep any warmth she had left, but the icy air seemed determined to reach every part of her body. Her stomach ached, not just from the cold, but from hunger that had been gnawing at her for hours. She had wandered for miles through the outskirts of the small western town, hoping for some sign of life, some place to take shelter, some friendly face. But all she saw were shuttered houses, dark streets, and the endless white of snow stretching in every direction. Maria's mind wandered back to the events that had brought her here. Just a few days ago, she had a roof over her head, warm meals, and a place where she felt safe. But circumstances had changed quickly, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back. She had tried asking for help, knocking on doors, pleading with strangers, but most of the townspeople were suspicious or unkind. The bitter wind and empty streets now seemed to mock her, whispering that she had nowhere to go. She wished she had a plan, a way out, but all she could do was keep moving forward, step by step, hoping for a miracle. As she trudged through the snow, her eyes caught sight of a small light flickering in the distance. It came from a solitary cabin, tucked away behind a grove of leafless trees. Smoke rose gently from its chimney, curling into the dark sky like a promise of warmth. Maria froze for a moment, unsure if she should approach. She had learned long ago that strangers did not always welcome people like her. Still, her body was trembling uncontrollably, and the thought of sitting near a fire, even for a little while, was too tempting to resist. She approached cautiously, her footsteps quiet in the thick snow. The cabin looked modest but sturdy, with wooden walls that had weathered many winters. She could smell the faint scent of burning wood mixed with something else, food perhaps. Her stomach growled at the thought. She paused near the door, scanning the area, hoping no one would notice her lurking in the shadows. Every part of her screamed to run away, to stay hidden, but the cold was relentless, and so was her hunger. Taking a deep breath, Maria edged closer to the cabin. The door was slightly ajar, probably from the wind or maybe left open by someone inside. She hesitated for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest. Entering without permission was risky, but she had learned that sometimes risks were necessary to survive. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "Please, let them be kind. Let me stay just for a little while." With hands trembling, she pushed the door just a little wider and slipped inside. The warmth hit her immediately, wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Her teeth chattered for a moment before she finally stopped shaking enough to notice her surroundings. The cabin was small but cozy. A fireplace crackled in one corner, casting a golden glow over the wooden walls. A few pieces of furniture were scattered around: a table, a chair, a small bed covered with a thick blanket. It was a simple life, but it was better than the frozen streets outside. Maria took a cautious step forward, trying to make as little noise as possible. She did not know who lived here or what kind of person they were. She had to be careful, but the need to survive overpowered her fear. She inched closer to the fire, letting her cold fingers hover near the warmth. For a few brief moments, she allowed herself to imagine being safe. The flames danced in her eyes, and she felt the tension in her body slowly loosen. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to give her courage. Suddenly, a shadow moved near the doorway. Maria froze, her heart skipping a beat. A man stepped into the light holding a lantern. His eyes widened when he saw her standing there, shivering, half hidden by the door. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with rugged features and a look of surprise that quickly turned to suspicion. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm but not cruel. Maria's voice caught in her throat. She wanted to explain, but words seemed too heavy in the cold, quiet room. She swallowed hard, fighting the urge to cry. Finally, she managed to whisper, I'm sorry. Please, I'm cold. I have nowhere to go." The man studied her carefully. He did not immediately shout or kick her out, which gave Maria a small flicker of hope. She took another step forward, her voice shaking. "I can be useful, stay quiet. Just don't throw me out." Her words sounded desperate even to her own ears, but she had no choice. Survival demanded honesty and humility, and she offered both with all the courage she had left. There was silence for a moment, only the crackling of the fire and the faint whistle of the wind outside. Maria's breath came in short gasps as she waited for him to react. Finally, he spoke, his tone cautious. "Why should I let you stay?" Maria thought quickly. I can help. I can clean, I can fetch water. I can do anything you need. I just need a place to stay tonight." She lowered her eyes, hoping he would see the sincerity in her expression. Her teeth chattered again, and she hugged herself tightly. The cold had reached every part of her, and she felt the weakness in her limbs. She could not imagine facing another night outside in this freezing wind. The man took a step closer, lowering the lantern slightly. He studied her, his eyes softening just a little. Maria noticed that he seemed conflicted, as if he wanted to help but was unsure. She held her breath, praying that he would allow her to stay. The cabin felt like a fragile world of warmth and hope, and she feared losing it as soon as it had appeared. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed. "All right," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "You can stay, but you follow my rules. No wandering off, no touching my things without permission. Understand?" Maria nodded quickly, relief washing over her. Yes, I understand. Thank you so much." Her voice was barely more than a whisper, but the gratitude in her eyes was clear. She stepped closer to the fire, letting its heat seep into her frozen body. For the first time that day, she felt a small spark of safety, like a tiny light in the darkness. That night, Maria sat quietly near the fire, warming her hands and watching the flames dance. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she was safe. The snowstorm raged outside, but inside the cabin there was warmth, light, and a fragile sense of hope. She realized that sometimes, survival meant taking risks, asking for help and trusting strangers, something she had never been able to do easily before. And as she watched the man, Jack, as he later introduced himself, tend to the fire and prepare a small meal, Maria felt a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time, the possibility of belonging. The night was still long and the world outside was still harsh, but for this moment she had found a place where she could rest, recover, and perhaps, just perhaps, start to rebuild her life. The morning light seeped gently through the small windows of the cabin, illuminating the warmth of the wooden interior. Maria woke to the soft crackling of the fire, now low but still glowing. Her body felt sore from the cold of the previous night, but for the first time in days, she felt rested. The fear that had gnawed at her all through the snowy streets had eased just a little. She stretched quietly, careful not to wake the man who had allowed her to stay, Jack, he had said his name was. Maria looked around, taking in the simple life within the cabin. The furniture was plain but sturdy, showing signs of years of careful use. A few personal items were scattered on shelves, a small collection of books, a tin of seeds, and a photo in a worn frame. She wondered briefly who Jack was, what his life had been like, and why he lived so far from the town. But the questions had to wait. Survival came first. She rose and approached the fire, adding a few small pieces of wood she had found near the door. The fire flickered, brightening the room, and Maria felt a comforting warmth spread through her body. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had not eaten since early morning the day before. She scanned the cabin, noticing a small pantry with a few cans and dried goods. Carefully, she opened one of the cans of beans and heated it over the fire. The smell alone made her stomach twist with relief, and she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Jack emerged from a small room at the back, stretching and rubbing his eyes. Maria froze for a moment, unsure if he would be angry at her presence in the kitchen area. but Jack simply nodded toward the fire, then busied himself with chores, stacking firewood, checking the horses tied outside, and cleaning the cabin floor. He did not speak at first, letting her eat in silence, which Maria appreciated. After finishing her meal, Maria quietly began to tidy the cabin. She swept the floor, wiped down surfaces, and straightened a few scattered items. She noticed Jack glancing at her from time to time, his eyes curious but guarded. Maria realized that she had to earn his trust, and quickly. Survival depended not just on warmth and food, but on being seen as someone useful rather than a burden. Over the next few hours, Maria learned quickly how things worked in Jack's cabin. She fetched water from the small well outside, careful not to spill any, and stacked firewood neatly to ensure the fire would last. Jack observed her from the corner of the room, occasionally offering instructions in a gruff but not unkind voice. "Keep the wood stacked close to the fire. If it's wet, it won't burn," he said at one point. Maria nodded eagerly, soaking up every bit of information. Despite the morning chores, there was an awkward tension between them. Maria wanted to speak, to explain more about herself, but she was unsure how much Jack wanted to know. He was a man of few words, his face set in a mask of calm that made it hard to read him. But she noticed small things, a brief smile when she managed a difficult task, the way he handed her tools without a word, and the way he allowed her to stay near the fire. These little gestures gave her hope that he might not be as harsh as she had feared. By midday, the wind outside had picked up, sending snow swirling against the cabin walls. Maria glanced out the window, shivering slightly at the sight of the frozen landscape. She thought about the nights she had spent alone in the streets, trying to find shelter wherever she could. The memory made her stomach churn, and she hugged herself tightly, grateful that she was now safe inside. Jack broke the silence with a question she had been expecting but still startled her. "Why were you out in that storm? Where did you come from?" Maria hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. She wanted to be honest, but there was a part of her that feared judgment. After a moment she spoke quietly, her voice trembling. I have nowhere to go. I was on the streets looking for shelter, trying to survive. I didn't mean to intrude, I just needed a place to stay, even for a night." Jack listened quietly, his expression unreadable. Then he said something unexpected. "You could have frozen out there. You were lucky to find this cabin. But you need to understand, this place isn't a refuge for strangers. You stay because I said so, not because it's safe to wander into someone's home." Maria nodded quickly, grateful for the opportunity but aware of the rules. She wanted to assure him that she would be careful, that she would follow his instructions and be useful. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll do anything you need. I won't cause trouble. I just need a chance." The rest of the day passed in a rhythm of chores and quiet observation. Maria cleaned, tended to the fire, and even tried her hand at helping with the small garden outside, brushing off snow and checking the plants for frost damage. Jack watched, occasionally offering a word of advice but mostly letting her work. Maria felt a growing sense of purpose, realizing that her actions were not only keeping her warm and fed, but also contributing to the cabin's upkeep. As evening approached, Jack prepared a simple meal of stew and bread. Maria watched in fascination as he worked with practiced efficiency, chopping vegetables, tending the fire, and stirring the pot with care. When the meal was ready, he placed a bowl in front of her. "Eat," he said gruffly, but his eyes showed a hint of kindness. Maria ate quickly but politely, savoring every bite. The food filled more than just her stomach, it warmed her spirit as well. After dinner, they sat near the fire, the room quiet except for the occasional crackle of wood. Maria felt a mix of nervousness and curiosity. She wanted to learn more about Jack, about his life, but she did not want to intrude. Finally she asked hesitantly, Do you live here alone?" Jack nodded. "Yes, it's quiet and I like it that way." It's easier to manage the land, the horses, and the cabin when there are no distractions. His tone was factual, not unfriendly, and Maria sensed that he was willing to answer questions, just cautiously. Maria smiled faintly, feeling a small connection forming. "It must be peaceful," she said. "Even in the snowstorm, it seems calm here." Jack allowed himself a small smile, the first one she had seen. "Peaceful, yes, but lonely sometimes. That's why I wasn't sure about letting you stay." "I don't have company often, and I like it that way." Maria nodded, understanding the caution in his words. "I won't be trouble," she said. "I just need a place to survive the cold. I can help you with chores, and I'll stay out of your way." The night grew darker outside, the storm intensifying. Maria sat quietly, reflecting on how different her life was from the night before. She had been shivering on the streets, desperate and alone, and now she was inside a warm cabin with food and shelter. She realized that she had taken a big risk by sneaking into the cabin, but it had paid off. More importantly, she had learned that trust was a fragile but powerful thing. She would need to prove herself further if she wanted to continue staying here. As she prepared to sleep on the small bed Jack had offered, Maria felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The day had been long and filled with small but meaningful victories. She had earned a small measure of Jack's trust, learned some of the rules of the cabin, and found warmth in the fire and food. She closed her eyes, letting the heat of the fire seep into her bones, feeling for the first time in days that perhaps she could survive this harsh winter. And though she knew the road ahead would be challenging, Maria also knew that she had taken the first step toward something new. A chance to rebuild her life, even in the most unlikely of places, and perhaps to form a connection with someone who could become more than just a stranger in the cold. The days following Maria's first night in Jack's cabin passed in a quiet, steady rhythm. Winter had tightened its grip on the land, painting everything outside with frost and snow. But inside the cabin, life began to settle into a small, predictable pattern. Maria awoke each morning to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the frost-covered windows. She would start the fire, prepare a simple breakfast, and tidy the cabin. Each small task became a lesson in patience, resilience, and usefulness. Jack, for his part, remained cautious but attentive. He observed Maria closely, assessing not only her abilities but her character. There was a wariness in his eyes, a measure of protection for himself and the cabin, but he also seemed intrigued by her determination. Maria sensed that the key to staying was more than just following rules. She needed to earn trust, and that required more than words. It required action. Her first real test came on a particularly harsh morning. The snow outside had drifted high, nearly burying the steps leading to the cabin. The horses, tied to a post near the stable, were restless and uneasy. Jack had been planning to tend to them, but his ankle was sore from a minor slip on the ice the day before. Maria noticed him limping as he prepared the fire and knew this was her chance to show her usefulness. "I can help," she said quietly, approaching him. Jack paused, looking skeptical. "I don't want you to get hurt." "I'll be careful," Maria replied, her voice firm but respectful. "I want to help, please let me." Jack studied her for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, he said, "All right, but follow my instructions exactly." She smiled faintly, feeling a surge of pride and relief. Under Jack's careful guidance, she learned to handle the horses in the cold, brushing their coats, checking their hooves for ice, and making sure they had fresh water. It was harder than she had imagined. Her hands grew red and numb, and the icy wind bit at her face. But she pushed on, motivated by a growing sense of purpose. Jack watched silently for most of the time, occasionally offering advice or correcting her technique. "Keep the brush steady," he said, "and speak softly. Horses respond better to calm voices." Maria followed his instructions, her focus sharp. By the end of the morning, the horses were calm and clean, and Maria felt a quiet triumph. She had earned Jack's acknowledgement with her actions, and though he didn't lavish her with praise, she noticed a subtle nod of approval. After the chores, Maria returned to the cabin to warm her hands by the fire. The simple act of resting felt like a reward, a moment to appreciate her accomplishments. She noticed small details she hadn't before. The way Jack had organized his tools, the care he had taken to protect the cabin from the harsh winter, and the quiet efficiency with which he managed his daily life. She realized that surviving wasn't just about warmth and food. It was about understanding, observing, and contributing. Over the next few days, Maria's role in the cabin expanded. She prepared meals, cleaned the floors, and even started organizing supplies in a way that made daily life smoother. Jack, who had initially been reserved, began to rely on her more. He would hand her tasks without instruction, trusting her to handle them properly. Maria felt a sense of pride in her growing competence, but also a deep respect for Jack. She understood that trust was earned slowly and carefully, and that every action mattered. One afternoon, Maria decided to try her hand at a task she had been nervous about, tending the small garden near the cabin. Though winter was harsh, a few hardy plants still grew under layers of frost. She brushed off the snow, checking for signs of damage and carefully watering the soil where it had not frozen. Jack watched from the cabin doorway, arms crossed. "You're taking care of it well," he said quietly. Maria felt a small glow of satisfaction. It was not just survival she was contributing to, it was life itself, even in the coldest months. As the days passed, conversations between Maria and Jack grew longer and more natural. At first, they had spoken only out of necessity, exchanging instructions and confirmations. But now they shared small stories, fragments of their lives. Maria told Jack about her childhood, her struggles, and the moments that had led her to wander the streets. She spoke honestly but without bitterness, letting him understand her without overwhelming him. Jack, in turn, began to reveal parts of his own story. He had grown up in the town nearby, learning to manage the land and care for animals from a young age. Life had not been easy. He had faced loss and loneliness that left him wary of strangers. But he had also learned resilience, the value of hard work, and the quiet satisfaction of being self-reliant. Maria listened carefully, noticing the subtle vulnerability behind his rugged exterior. Their shared experiences of hardship created a quiet bond, built on understanding and mutual respect. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Maria suggested helping with dinner. She chopped vegetables while Jack stirred a pot of stew. The warmth of the fire and the rhythmic motion of cooking created a peaceful atmosphere. Maria realized how far she had come, from a desperate girl seeking shelter to someone capable of contributing meaningfully to another person's life. She felt a sense of belonging, a fragile but real connection to the cabin and the man who had allowed her to stay. Jack, noticing her careful work, spoke with quiet approval. "You've learned quickly," he said. "Most people would have made a mess of things." Maria smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement. She had not just survived the cold, she had begun to thrive in the safety and structure Jack provided. It was a small victory, but it meant everything to her. As night fell, Maria reflected on the lessons she had learned. Survival required more than courage. It required observation, patience, and the willingness to work for others, not just oneself. She had discovered that trust could be built through action, not words, and that kindness often came in quiet, measured forms rather than grand gestures. The following morning brought a new challenge. A sudden storm had left the roads and paths around the cabin impassable. Jack's supplies from the town were running low, and Maria realized she needed to help in ways beyond the cabin itself. Though she could not leave the property in the storm, she began organizing the pantry, rationing food, and planning how they could make their resources last longer. Jack watched her, his eyes showing both surprise and admiration. "You're thinking ahead," he said. That's a good skill to have out here. Maria felt a quiet pride. Her usefulness was no longer just about physical tasks. It was about strategy, foresight, and care. She was learning not just to survive, but to support and protect the small world they shared within the cabin. By the end of the week, the bond between Maria and Jack had strengthened significantly. Though he remained cautious and reserved, he relied on her presence, advice, and help. Maria, in turn, had grown confident, feeling both capable and valued. She realized that survival was no longer a solitary endeavor. It was now a shared effort, and the trust and respect she had earned allowed her to feel warmth, not just from the fire, but from human connection. One night as they sat by the fireplace, the storm raging outside, Maria quietly spoke. "Thank you," she said softly, "for letting me stay, for trusting me." Jack glanced at her, a brief softness in his expression. "You've earned it," he replied. "It's not just about being here, it's about showing you belong, and you're doing that." Maria felt a deep sense of relief. She had not only found shelter but a place where her presence mattered, a place where her actions could make a difference. She had moved from being a desperate stranger to someone who contributed, learned, and began to understand the quiet rhythms of life in the cabin. And as the fire crackled, casting warm shadows on the wooden walls, Maria realized that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, harsh weather, unexpected difficulties, and the slow work of building trust, but she felt ready. She had proven to herself and to Jack that she could be reliable, resourceful, and resilient. The cabin was no longer just a place to survive. It was becoming a place to belong, a place where life, even in its simplest forms, mattered. The days grew colder as winter reached its peak. Snow covered the landscape in thick, unbroken layers, making travel outside the cabin difficult and dangerous. But inside, life continued with a quiet routine, the rhythm of survival and care becoming almost comforting. Maria had settled into her role seamlessly. She was no longer just a guest. She was part of the cabin's life, helping with chores, preparing meals, tending to the animals, and even keeping track of supplies in anticipation of the harsh weeks ahead. Jack noticed her growing confidence and reliability. He still spoke sparingly, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. The cautious skepticism that had defined their early interactions was giving way to something warmer, an acknowledgement of Maria's perseverance and usefulness. He would glance at her sometimes with a small, unspoken approval, a recognition of the fact that she was no longer just surviving, but actively contributing to the life they shared. One morning, as Maria stacked firewood near the entrance, Jack approached with a bundle of tools. "The shed door's stuck," he said. "I need you to help me fix it." Maria nodded eagerly, thrilled at the opportunity to demonstrate her skills. Together, they worked to repair the old wooden hinges, their hands brushing occasionally as they held the heavy door steady. Maria marveled at how natural it felt to work alongside him, side by side, toward a common goal. As they worked, Jack spoke quietly, almost as if testing the waters. "You've adapted quickly," he said. "Most people wouldn't last even a week out here. But you've learned how to help, how to think ahead. That's not easy." Maria smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She appreciated the recognition, even if it was subtle. "I had to learn," she replied softly. "I didn't have a choice." The day continued with small tasks, tidying the cabin, checking the animals, repairing a broken fence. Maria worked diligently, aware that every effort mattered. She began to notice little things she hadn't before. The way Jack measured the wood, the way he listened to the wind before deciding whether to venture outside, the care he took with every task, no matter how small. She admired his quiet skill, and she began to understand that survival was as much about observation and patience as it was about effort. As evening approached, the snowstorm intensified, whipping against the cabin walls and making the world outside nearly unrecognizable. Maria gathered firewood while Jack prepared a simple meal. The cabin smelled of stew and burning wood, a comforting contrast to the harsh cold outside. As they sat by the fire, Maria noticed how the quiet moments had become easier to share. She no longer felt like an intruder. She felt like a companion, someone whose presence was acknowledged and valued. "Maria," Jack said finally, breaking the silence, "you've changed the cabin. It feels more alive with you here." Maria blinked, surprised. She had not expected such a statement from him. I just try to help," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "It's more than help. You think ahead, you care about the small things, and you notice things I've stopped paying attention to. You make this place feel complete." His words were quiet, almost hesitant, but they carried a weight Maria could feel. For the first time, she realized that her presence had made a real difference, not just to herself, but to someone else. Over the next several days, their bond deepened in subtle ways. They shared small stories of their pasts, each revelation building trust. Maria spoke of her childhood, her struggles, and the lessons she had learned while surviving on her own. Jack shared memories of his youth, the challenges of working the land, and the quiet moments of loneliness that had defined much of his life. They began to understand each other, not just through words, but through shared experience and observation. One particularly cold evening, Jack asked Maria to help with the horses. A light snow had fallen throughout the day, and the animals needed extra care to ensure they stayed warm. Maria worked beside Jack, brushing the horses' coats and checking their hooves for ice. The wind cut through her layers, but she barely noticed, focused on the task at hand. Jack watched her closely, offering guidance when needed but allowing her to take the lead. "You're learning fast," he said, a rare note of pride in his voice. Maria's heart lifted at his words. "I want to learn," she replied. "I want to be useful." Jack nodded slowly. "You already are, but there's more to surviving out here than just chores. It's about patience, observation, and thinking ahead. You're beginning to understand that." Maria smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She realized that survival was not just about enduring the cold or completing tasks. It was about being present, aware, and thoughtful in every action. Each small success strengthened her confidence and her sense of belonging. She had moved from desperation to competence, from fear to a cautious but real trust in herself and in Jack. As winter deepened, there were moments of quiet reflection. Maria would sit by the fire in the evenings, watching the flames dance, thinking about how far she had come. She remembered the fear and cold of that first night, when she had snuck into the cabin with nothing but hope and desperation. Now, she had warmth, food, and a purpose. She had learned that trust could be earned through action, and that kindness often came in small, measured doses. Jack, for his part, began to rely on Maria in ways he had not expected. He would hand her tools, ask for her opinion, or simply allow her to manage tasks independently. Each small interaction built trust and deepened their bond. Maria noticed the subtle ways he showed care. The way he ensured she had warm clothing, the way he prepared food to suit her, the way he checked on her when she returned from outdoor chores. It was not dramatic, but it was meaningful. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Maria prepared a simple dinner while Jack tended the fire. The warmth of the cabin and the quiet companionship created a sense of peace. She realized that survival was no longer just a matter of enduring the cold. It was about creating a life, however small, and finding connection in unexpected places. Jack spoke quietly as they ate. "You've changed this place, Maria. I didn't expect it, but it's better with you here." Maria felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of pride and gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me, for letting me stay." Jack nodded, his expression softening. "You've earned it. It's not just about being here, it's about proving that you belong. And you're doing that." Maria realized that she had come a long way. From a desperate, freezing girl seeking shelter, she had become a capable, resourceful companion. She had earned Jack's trust, contributed to the cabin's life, and formed a bond built on shared effort and understanding. The cabin was no longer just a place to survive, it was a place to belong. As the night deepened, Maria reflected on the journey so far. There would be more challenges ahead, harsh weather, unexpected difficulties, and the slow work of building trust, but she felt ready. She had proven her strength, her resilience, and her ability to adapt. She had learned that trust and connection were earned through action, patience, and respect. The snowstorm outside raged on, but inside the cabin there was warmth, light, and the quiet assurance of companionship. Maria felt a sense of hope she had not experienced in a long time. The cabin had become more than a shelter. It was a place of learning, growth, and understanding. And as she sat by the fire, watching Jack quietly tend to the flames, she realized that this winter, harsh and unforgiving as it was, had brought her something she had never expected. A chance to belong, to contribute, and to build a life alongside someone who had once been a stranger. Winter began to slowly loosen its grip, though the land remained covered in a thick layer of snow. The days were still cold, but there was a hint of change in the air, a promise of spring somewhere beyond the horizon. Inside the cabin, life had grown steady and predictable, a rhythm that both Jack and Maria had come to rely on. They had survived the harshest part of the season together, and in the process, something had shifted between them. The cabin, once a solitary refuge, had become a shared home. Maria woke one morning to the soft golden light filtering through the frost-covered windows. The fire had dwindled to embers, and she carefully added wood, feeling the warmth spread through the room. She moved quietly, aware that Jack was still asleep in the small room at the back. She paused for a moment, thinking about how far she had come. From the freezing streets outside to this cabin, from fear and desperation to a life where she felt valued and trusted. Breakfast was simple, oatmeal and some dried fruit, but Maria prepared it with care, placing the bowls on the table just as Jack stirred awake. He yawned and stretched, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. When he saw the food, he nodded appreciatively. "You've learned well," he said quietly. Maria smiled, feeling pride but also gratitude. She had earned this place in his life, and it was more than just survival, it was belonging. After breakfast, they set about their daily chores. The horses needed attention, the firewood needed stacking, and the small cabin required cleaning. Maria moved with confidence now, handling tasks she would have struggled with just weeks before. Jack noticed the subtle difference in her manner. She worked efficiently, observed carefully, and anticipated what needed to be done without being told. He felt a quiet admiration for her resilience and skill. During a mid-morning break, Maria suggested they try to repair part of the fence that had been damaged by the heavy snow. Jack agreed, and together they worked in the cold, their hands busy and their movements coordinated. There was a sense of ease in the work, a rhythm that made the hours pass quickly. They exchanged small words and laughter, a sound that had been rare in the cabin before Maria's arrival. It was not forced, it was natural, born from shared effort and growing trust. After finishing the fence, they returned to the cabin, hands numb but spirits high. Maria tended to the fire while Jack checked the supplies, and she realized that life here had become a partnership. Each had a role, each contributed, and each relied on the other. The realization filled her with warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. She had moved beyond simply surviving. She was now a vital part of the cabin's life. That evening, after a simple dinner of stew and bread, they sat by the fire in comfortable silence. Maria found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in such a short time. She thought about the fear and desperation of that first night, when she had snuck into the cabin, cold and hungry, unsure of what awaited her. Now she had warmth, food, purpose, and, perhaps most importantly, connection. She realized that survival was no longer just about enduring the elements. It was about building a life, no matter how small, and finding someone to share it with. Jack broke the silence, his voice soft and deliberate. "You've done more than survive, Maria. You've made this cabin livable in a way I didn't think was possible. You've earned more than my trust. You've earned a place here." Maria felt a warmth rush through her chest. She had worked hard to prove herself, but hearing it acknowledged so sincerely made her heart swell. "Thank you," she whispered. "I never imagined I could belong anywhere like this." As the weeks passed, their bond continued to strengthen. They shared more stories, small moments of humor, and the quiet understanding that comes from shared struggle. Maria learned about Jack's life growing up, the responsibilities he had shouldered, and the solitude he had endured. Jack learned about Maria's past, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had learned while surviving alone. These shared stories built a bridge between them, turning simple companionship into something deeper: trust, respect, and a quiet sense of loyalty. One particularly cold evening, Maria brought up an idea she had been considering. "Jack, maybe we can start preparing the garden for spring," she suggested. "Even in the snow, we can plan ahead, organize seeds, and get ready for new growth." Jack looked thoughtful, then nodded slowly. "That's a good idea. Planning ahead will make the transition easier when the snow melts." Together, they worked to prepare the small plots, organizing supplies, checking the soil, and making lists of what they would need once the weather improved. It was more than a task. It was a symbol of hope, a sign that life would continue beyond the hardships of winter. The nights grew slightly shorter, and the air carried a hint of thaw. Inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire and the comfort of shared presence made even the coldest evenings bearable. Maria realized that she had found something she had never truly experienced before: stability. A life that was steady, predictable, and shared. The trust and companionship she had earned allowed her to relax in a way that would have been impossible just weeks ago. One night, as the snow fell softly outside, Maria and Jack sat near the fire, talking quietly. The light from the flames cast a gentle glow on their faces, and the world outside seemed distant and harsh compared to the warmth within. Maria reflected on the journey they had taken together, from a desperate girl sneaking into a cabin to someone who was now a trusted companion, capable of contributing to a shared life. She realized that the bond between them had grown stronger than either could have anticipated. Jack, noticing her reflective expression, spoke quietly. "You've changed this place, Maria, and maybe you've changed me too." Maria blinked, surprised at the admission. "How?" she asked softly. "You've reminded me that trust, connection, and care aren't weaknesses. They're strengths," he explained. "You've shown me that sharing life with someone, even just in small ways, makes it richer." "I didn't expect to feel that way again, but I do." Maria felt a warmth in her chest, understanding that their bond was no longer just practical. It was personal, meaningful, and deeply rooted in shared experience. In the days that followed, they continued to build their life together. Maria tended the animals, prepared meals, and helped organize supplies, while Jack continued to guide her subtly, trusting her judgment more each day. They worked in tandem, a quiet partnership built on respect, effort, and understanding. Maria realized that survival had evolved into something more profound, a shared life, full of purpose, care, and connection. Spring slowly approached, melting the snow and revealing the world outside in new light. The cabin, once a place of refuge, had become a home, a place where both Maria and Jack felt safe, valued, and connected. The garden they had planned together began to take shape, small green shoots emerging from the soil, a symbol of growth, renewal, and hope. Maria looked around the cabin, at the firewood stacked neatly, the animals' content, and the space filled with quiet life. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Maria and Jack sat by the fire, reflecting on the journey they had shared. Maria spoke quietly. "I never imagined I could find a place like this, a place where I belong." Jack nodded, his expression soft. "You earned it," he said. "You've worked hard, proven yourself, and shown me that trust and connection are worth it. You're not just surviving anymore, you're living." Maria smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She had moved from a life of fear, hunger, and cold to one of warmth, purpose, and companionship. The cabin, the fire, the animals, and Jack's quiet presence had transformed her world. She realized that sometimes survival was not just about endurance. It was about finding connection, proving one's worth, and creating a life, however small, that mattered. As night fell, they sat quietly together, the fire crackling softly between them. Outside, the snow glistened under the moonlight, but inside there was warmth, light, and the quiet comfort of shared life. Maria felt a profound sense of peace, knowing that she had not only survived the winter but had found a home and a companion in Jack. The journey from desperation to belonging had been long and difficult, but it had led to something far more meaningful than she could have imagined, a place where she was valued, trusted, and truly at home. And as they watched the fire burn low, Maria realized that this was just the beginning. Together, they would face the challenges of the coming seasons, tend the land and the animals, and continue building a life founded on trust, care, and shared purpose. The cabin, once a refuge, was now a home, filled with hope, resilience, and the quiet warmth of connection. Maria had found more than shelter. She had found a life, a bond, and the certainty that even in the harshest conditions, kindness, trust, and effort could create a place to belong.